My 11-year-old daughter sat freezing in the pouring rain for exactly 5 hours. 5 hours. Because my own mother changed the locks. I didn't scream when she finally opened the door to gloat. I didn't cry. The hardest part about destroying your own family isn't the guilt. It's keeping your mouth shut while they dig their own graves. I am currently standing in a $62,000 custom-renovated kitchen. I didn't pay a single cent for it. My sister did, right before I legally evicted her and my mother, and left them with absolutely nothing. But to understand how I legally seized my family's life savings without breaking a single law, you need to understand what they did to my daughter first. I don't know what time it is where you're watching this, or if you're listening while driving, but drop a comment below and tell me right now. What is the absolute worst thing a toxic family member has ever done to you? Because mine demanded a literal ransom for my own peace of mind. People ask me why I lived in a damp, unfinished basement for 2.5 years when I had my late father's estate trust sitting in a leather folder inside my desk. They think I was weak. They think I was a doormat. Here is the secret. The trust had a very specific, ironclad, harm and exclusion clause. My father was a clinical psychiatrist. He knew exactly what my mother, Eleanor, and my sister, Kendra, were capable of. He knew that the second he died, they would try to erase me from the property if I simply kicked them out without cause. Eleanor could contest the trust. She could claim marital duress. She could tie me up in probate court for a decade and bleed my finances dry with legal fees. But if they actively excluded me from the primary residence, or if they physically endangered my minor child, the house defaulted 100% to me, without contest, without mediation. I wasn't hiding in that basement. I was acting as a sniper. I was simply waiting for them to break the law. I didn't pay for their lifestyle out of love. I paid them to buy time. I needed to keep them incredibly comfortable until the trap was perfectly set. It started with the property taxes. Eleanor deliberately ignored the county tax notices for 18 months until a lien was placed on the house. I had to log into my Fidelity retirement portal. I had to click through 3 separate warning screens. I stared at the stark white interface as a 30% early withdrawal penalty flashed in bright red text. I typed in the exact amount, $18,500. I authorized the wire transfer. I drove down to the county tax assessor's office. I handed the clerk a certified cashier's check. I made absolutely sure my legal name was the only name printed on the physical county receipt. That single piece of paper established a legal precedent of sole financial maintenance. It was the bedrock of their ruin. Then came Kendra's car. A brand new, white Audi A4. $800. Every single month. I watched that auto draft leave my checking account on the first of every month like clockwork. While I worked remote night shifts doing corporate strategic planning in a basement that smelled like old pine and wet concrete, Kendra was upstairs in the master suite, drinking $60 bottles of Sauvignon Blanc that I paid for, browsing Pinterest on an iPad Pro that I bought her for her birthday. If you've ever bankrupted yourself trying to keep a toxic family member happy, hit the subscribe button right now. You're going to love how this ends. I kept my head down. I ignored it when I saw Kendra covertly measuring the kitchen dimensions. I ignored the expensive, high-gloss Italian paint swatches she left fanned out across the island. I was waiting for one specific, fatal mistake. A mistake my late father's attorney warned me about. It was a Tuesday evening. I was driving home from a grueling 12-hour corporate strategy retreat. The rain was coming down in heavy, blinding sheets. The windshield wipers were struggling to clear the glass. I pulled my car into the driveway at 6:42 p.m. The headlights washed over the front porch. My foot slammed on the brake. Josephine was huddled against the wet brick exterior. Her knees were pulled tightly to her chest. She was soaked entirely to the bone. I threw the transmission into park. I didn't even grab my coat or my umbrella. I ran up the concrete steps. Josephine looked up at me. Her lips were a pale, bruised blue. Her teeth were chattering so violently she could barely speak. "Mommy, why doesn't Grandma want me?" I stopped. I looked at the heavy oak front door. I pushed my brass key into the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. The pins didn't align. The cylinder was completely new, a fresh, bright silver quickset lock. I stepped to the left. I looked through the large front bay window. The living room was warmly lit. A fire was crackling in the gas fireplace. Eleanor was sitting on the plush velvet sofa. She was holding her glass of wine. Kendra was sitting across from her. She was actively laughing. She was swiping on that exact iPad Pro. Zooming in on Calicut marble countertop samples. They were 20 feet away from my freezing child. They knew she was there. They simply did not care. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. You only cry when you still have hope. In that moment, I just looked at the math. I opened my right hand. I let the useless brass key drop directly into the freezing puddle at my feet. A dull, metallic splash. I took off my heavy wool coat and wrapped it tightly around Josephine's trembling shoulders. I stopped fighting the lock. Suddenly, the heavy oak door clicked. The new deadbolt slid back. Eleanor opened the door exactly 3 inches. She kept the heavy brass security chain firmly attached to the frame. She looked down at us. Her face was set in a rehearsed, pitying mask. Eleanor looked down at us with this fake, hollow smile. "Whitney, your energy is just too toxic for this house right now," Eleanor stated. Her voice dripped with weaponized therapy speak. "We need space to heal. You need to find somewhere else." She waited for the explosion. She wanted me to beg. She wanted me to scream and beat my fists against the wood so she could call the police and play the terrified victim. I looked at her. I analyzed the exact geometry of her fake smile. I didn't blink. I looked my mother dead in the eyes and said one word. "Understood." I turned around. I walked my daughter back to the car. I strapped her into the heated passenger seat. I didn't call anyone. I didn't send a furious text message. I drove straight to the Four Seasons Hotel downtown. I walked into the lobby. It smelled intensely of cedar and expensive espresso. The ambient lighting was a warm, soft gold. I walked straight up to the marble concierge desk. I requested a corner executive suite. It cost exactly $1,200 a night. I didn't use my personal debit card. I handed the concierge a heavy black metal card. It was tied to a private escrow account, the exact account Walter Finch, my father's attorney, had established for this precise legal contingency. The estate was paying for it. Once Josephine was asleep in a heated, king-sized bed. I opened my laptop. The screen illuminated the dark hotel room. It was time to go to work. While they were clinking wine glasses and celebrating their fake victory, I was accessing the back end of my personal AWS cloud server. Kendra changed the physical locks. She was feeling incredibly smart, but she was too stupid to realize the Ring camera subscription wasn't tied to the local Wi-Fi router. When I moved into the basement 2 years ago, I rerouted the entire smart home infrastructure through an encrypted S3 bucket. She could change the router password. She could rip the physical camera off the brick wall. It wouldn't matter. The data was already mirrored off-site in real time. I had the 1080p high-definition footage downloaded before my car even left the driveway. I pulled up the digital dashboard. The red timeline bar stretched across my screen. Timestamp: 1:15 p.m. Josephine arrives on the porch. Timestamp: 1:45 p.m. The rain begins. Timestamp: 3 p.m. Eleanor walks past the front window, looks directly at Josephine, and deliberately closes the blinds. 5 full hours of a freezing minor. Unambiguous. Time-stamped proof of material harm. The vault was unlocked. I downloaded the footage. I synced it with a certified digital receipt for the $18,000 property tax payment. I placed every single file into an encrypted folder labeled Finch Execution. By the way, if you're taking notes on how to legally dismantle a narcissist, you might want to subscribe. But let's keep that between us. I gave them exactly 3 days. 72 hours of absolute, suffocating radio silence. The exact amount of time it took for her massive, non-refundable contractor deposits to clear the bank. I needed those 3 days because Kendra was moving fast. She had blocked my phone number. She had blocked my Instagram account. But she forgot her Pinterest boards were completely public. I sat in my hotel suite, drinking black coffee, and tracked her digital footprint like a forensic accountant. She created a new board titled My New Kitchen. She was pinning copper farmhouse sinks. She was pinning imported Italian tile at $40 a square foot. But Pinterest wasn't enough. I needed the definitive financial trigger. 2 years ago, I set up the basement Mac Mini. Kendra had logged into her Apple ID to download a movie and never logged out. The authentication token was still valid. I opened the Mail app. I bypassed the 2-factor authentication because the machine was already a trusted device. I sat in the dark and watched her Apple Mail inbox populate in real time. I watched her financial suicide unfold. Email by email. Monday, 10:14 a.m. Email from Premier Contracting Services. Subject line: Deposit required for demolition phase. Monday, 11:30 a.m. Automated receipt from Chase Bank. Wire transfer successful. Amount: $14,000. Tuesday, 2:45 p.m. Email from Italian Stone Imports. Final invoice for Calicatus Labs. Wednesday, 9 a.m. Chase Bank alert. Wire transfer successful. Amount: $48,000. She was signing the legally binding contracts. She was wiring the money. She was pouring her entire life savings into the luxury remodel. Exactly $62,000. $62,000 of her own money. To renovate a house she legally forfeited the second she locked my daughter in the rain. I watched the final wire transfer clear at 9:14 a.m. on Thursday. The 72 hours were up. The concrete was set. I picked up my phone and dialed Walter Finch. It rang twice. "Walter," I said. "Execute." 3 days later, my mother received a certified letter from my father's estate attorney. It wasn't an invitation to talk. It wasn't a request for family mediation. It was a legal summons. Before I show you the exact document that destroyed her entire empire, make sure you hit subscribe. We don't just cut toxic family off. We collect the severance. You do not want to miss how this ends. I sat at the far end of a massive mahogany conference table. The law office was on the 42nd floor. Sterile. Aggressively modern. High glass windows overlooking the gray city skyline. Cold air conditioning humming in the background. Totally neutral. I stripped away all of Eleanor's domestic power. She couldn't hide behind her fireplace or her wine glasses here. Eleanor and Kendra arrived exactly 14 minutes late. A calculated power play. They walked in smugly. Kendra was holding an iced matcha latte, the green liquid swishing against the plastic cup. Eleanor sat down, adjusting her expensive silk scarf. She fully expected to sign a standard quitclaim deed. She assumed my silence meant complete surrender. "Let's make this quick, Whitney," Eleanor said, checking her gold watch. "We have demolition contractors waiting at the house." I didn't answer her. I took a slow, deliberate sip of sparkling water. the condensation dripping down the crystal glass. Walter Finch adjusted his silk tie. He opened the heavy, leather-bound folder. The exact folder that had been sitting in my desk for 2.5 years. He didn't yell. He didn't lecture them on morality or family values. He simply read the ironclad stipulations of my father's trust. Finch cleared his throat. He adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. He placed his index finger on the first paragraph. He read each word with the clinical precision of a surgeon making a lethal incision. The property at 402 Elmwood remains in trust, Finch stated, his voice entirely devoid of emotion. Any material exclusion or physical harm to the minor grandchild immediately strips all unauthorized occupants of their residency rights. Finch reached into the folder. He pushed a high-gloss printed still from the Ring camera across the polished wood table. It was a clear, high-definition shot of Josephine. Blue lips, shivering in the torrential rain. Time-stamped. Eleanor stared at the photograph. Her rehearsed, pitying smile vanished. The muscles in her jaw visibly slackened. Finch wasn't finished. He turned the thick parchment page. Furthermore, any capital improvements, contracted renovations, or financial deposits made by unauthorized occupants are instantly and irrevocably absorbed by the estate. Kendra physically slumped forward. The plastic ice latte cup slipped from her fingers. It hit the mahogany table with a sharp crack. The lid popped off. Green liquid spilled entirely across the expensive wood grain, pooling around the photograph of my daughter. Kendra didn't try to clean it up. Her right hand began to shake uncontrollably. She was doing the math in her head. She had just spent exactly $62,000. $62,000 in non-refundable wire transfers. To build a dream kitchen in a house she no longer had the legal right to enter. Finch peered over his wire-rimmed glasses. He offered zero empathy. He didn't hand them a tissue. He slid a single, thick document across the table. A 30-day vacate notice. He picked up his custom brass ink stamp. He pressed it onto the bottom line of the document. Thud. That was the sound of absolute finality. They had exactly 30 days to pack whatever fit in their cars and leave my property forever. They didn't speak. They didn't scream. They just sat there, paralyzed, staring at the wet black ink drying on the eviction notice. I stood up. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out of the conference room and took the elevator down to the lobby. Silence. Today, Josephine is sitting in that very kitchen. She is doing her algebra homework. She is sitting at a massive $15,000 Calacatta marble island.
$15,000.
Paid for entirely by the sister who left her freezing in the rain. The house is completely quiet. We are safe. I poured myself a glass of ice water. I ran my hand over the new, brushed brass cabinet handles Kendra meticulously picked out on Pinterest. They are perfectly aligned. Stunning craftsmanship. But the metal feels cold against my skin. A faint, lingering coldness. Shared DNA is not a contract. It does not guarantee safety. It does not guarantee loyalty. They drained their savings to build a kitchen they legally forfeited the second they locked my daughter in the rain. Let me know in the comments. If you were standing on that rainy porch, holding your freezing child, would you have warned them about the trust? Or would you have let them spend the $62,000 first? Subscribe to the channel, because next week, I am breaking down how a wife used a simple Wi-Fi router to legally seize her cheating husband's corporate shares. Until then, remember, never interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake, especially when they are paying for your marble countertops. Silence.